Rogue One is the most Star Warsy non-Star Wars film that ever Star Wars. I put off watching the movie for a few weeks after it came out and decided to go see it. I wanted to make this video yesterday, but didn't, because I wanted to allow it to marinate to see whether or not it would change my opinion or just kind of sleep on it. And after sleeping on it, my opinion has not changed. It's not a very good Star Wars film.
If grandfather built this thing, we need to find him.
All right. How many do I need?
They are requesting a call sign. It's, Rogue.
The problem with Rogue One is that it tries to set itself up to be different from the rest of the Star Wars films. You know, not to be any like the numerical trilogies. It's its own thing. It's its own story with its own characters. It doesn't exactly do that because it has to ham-fist all these Star Wars references into it. And I know that doesn't make any sense. Like, how can you ham-fist Star Wars into Star Wars? It's very easy. There were a lot of pointless cameos, a lot of pointless pop-ups, Easter eggs that didn't have to be in there at all. Now, I didn't hate Rogue One. There are a lot of parts of Rogue One that I actually thought were kind of entertaining. The action was fairly good. The first half was a slog. And the second half, things picked up a little bit, but it was definitely them trying to tie loose ends and begin to force feed or begin to pound that circle peg into the square hole. I think what annoyed me most about the film was just kind of how shameless it was about everything. The movie couldn't rely on a story and it couldn't rely on its characters, so it had to rely on the fact that it was Star Wars. One should never do that. If you're going to have a film that takes place within a certain part of the timeline, then you know, we know it's like watching Titanic. We know the boat fucking sinks. We know at the end of this movie they're gonna get the Death Star plans. The characters will die or just disappear into obscurity, in which case they died. So if that's the case, if we know that these characters are all going to die, we can't just have them all be meat shields for the end product. We need to make them interesting. But we don't do that. We just get like at this moment right now, without looking it up, I don't remember any of their names. I remember Jyn Erso because she's the heroine and she's the main character of the film, and they mention her like 30,000 fucking times in the film. And I remember Galen Erso because they made such a big deal about him, but he was barely in the film, even though he had such a big role in the film. Like, his role was significant, but it wasn't. Now, what I think is the most offensive thing you could have in this film is that there are two CGI moments within it of characters, one of which is Grand Moff Tarkin, and the second is Leia. What was most confusing about having those two in the film was the fact that we didn't need to have Leia or Tarkin in the movie. Leia was just a gimme at the very end. Like, the last 2 minutes, or even the last 30 seconds, is when she makes an appearance. She has one line of dialogue. Looking at her is like Disney Pixar presents Princess Leia. It is so uncanny, and it's so distracting when she's on screen. Albeit, it's only for about 30 seconds. But that last, like, just seeing it though, it stays with you, and you just can't remember anything else after that. You just think, wow, I just saw a Play-Doh version of Princess Leia on screen, and now I forgot what this fucking film was about. Tarkin, a little bit better, but he has a lot of scenes in this movie. When he first appears, I would have liked it if we never saw his face, but we just heard him talk, and we just have, and that's it. Just have one scene, little cameo, whatever, or just not have him at all. But he has about 5 scenes in this film. He's probably in the film for a grand total of 10, 15 minutes combined with all his scenes. The problem is when you do that, who's supposed to be the main antagonist, Director Krennic, you take away from him because you toss in Grand Moff Tarkin and you toss in Vader. And Vader was shamelessly put in this film just to put asses in seats because it has Darth Vader in it, who, by the way, looks like he's wearing a damn Halloween costume. Now, I've heard that the reason his outfit looks bizarre is because they've been trying to match it to his 1977 counterpart costume. The problem is that you can't really do that. If you're supposed to take this film seriously, you gotta make Vader look serious. Or you gotta just update his fucking costume. Who cares what he looked like in 77? If you're already gonna say fuck it, then say fuck it all the way. Don't bother trying to recreate that costume, because back then in 77, it was weird looking. It was bright and had fingerprints on it and glowing, beeping lights and shit. That's distracting. Vader throughout this entire film was distracting. Krennic should have been the main focus as a villain. We should have had more time with him. Instead, we had the ham-fist, Tarkin and Vader in it, because whoever made the film wanted to rely on nostalgia, and they probably thought that Krennic was not going to work as a villain, or that he couldn't carry it. And that's not Krennic's as the character's fault. That's not the actor's fault. That's the writer's fault. The worst thing you can have in a film like this is everything's boring. The action wasn't boring, but the story and characters were. What made the original Star Wars films great was not just the fact that it had amazing special effects at the time. It was the fact that Luke was interesting, Leia was interesting, Han was interesting, Lando Calrissian, Yoda, Obi-Wan Kenobi. These people had characters, and we had time to follow them and be with them and learn who they were. Look at A New Hope. We start off with our action first to get ourselves started, and then later, when the droids end up on Tatooine, we stick with them for a little bit. We learn who R2-D2 and C-3PO are, and then we come across Luke Skywalker, and we spend a good 15-20 minutes with Luke, with this farm boy who dreams of adventure, and we as the audience get to be a part of his life and get to see who this person is. What about, once again, I don't know their names. What about Awesome Rebel Guy? Don't really know anything about him. We don't really get to learn about him. He has one moment where he's kind of an asshole and he kills one of his fellow rebels as they're escaping. So we get the feeling that he can't be trusted, but at the same time we don't play off that anymore in the film. You get the understanding that he's a morally gray character, but then it doesn't do anything else with it. So who gives a crap? What was the point of him killing an ally if it doesn't happen again in the film? There's an opportunity where he can kill Galen Erso, but he doesn't do it. But we don't deserve, or he doesn't deserve that as a character development for not doing that. Because throughout the film, we don't see him being this gray character who just kills absentmindedly to progress with the mission, or anything like that. We just kills one guy, stuff with Jen, doesn't kill Galen. I mean, who cares? And every other character in the film was boring and pointless and didn't have to be there at all. They're just there to fill body bags for us to. The movie tricks us to feel emotional for these characters, or it manipulates you into thinking that they're close. One of the characters, who, once again, name I forgot, is aligned with Jyn as they're setting off on their own ways on the final suicide mission, and calls her little sister, as if these two had an amazing bond. This is the first time that these two characters ever spoke to each other in the film. Maybe they had one other line of dialogue together, but other than that, they probably shared one, maybe two lines of dialogue in the entire film. And yet, we're to believe that they're this close, calling each other family, calling each other little sister or big brother or things like that? No. Fuck you. That is shitty fucking writing, because we don't care about these characters. That movie didn't deserve that scene, because we never built up to that scene. We never got a moment where they sit around the campfire and talk to each other and discover who they are with each other. It's just point A to point B to point C, to action to action to action, and that's it. I love a good mindless action film, but when you brand Star Wars onto it, I expect something different. A lot of people expect something different. And what I hate the most is that there's this stigma of, you only hate it because it's cool. It's cool to hate Rogue One. It's cool to hate Suicide Squad. It's cool to hate Batman v Superman. And that's so lazy for someone to say that. It's incredibly lazy. because it implies that I dislike a movie because everyone else dislikes it. And I want to be cool, I want to be part of the in crowd, so therefore I dislike it. And that's not the case. I dislike a movie because I dislike the movie, because it had flaws. Movies have flaws. Every movie has flaws. But some have more than others, or some have more forgivable ones than others. And Rogue One, I'm sorry, has a lot of unforgivable flaws. I think what confuses me the most, though, was the last 15 minutes of the film, the big action scene to retrieve the Death Star plans. You have the head rebel ship, and they're going in hyperspace, they're leaving, but they get stopped by Vader and Vader boards, and we have our Vader jack-off session because he appears with lightsabers, and lightsabers kill people, and that's cool. Because that's all we really wanted. We just, if the movie was just 10 minutes of Vader running around with a lightsaber and stabbing people, probably would have made the same amount of money, and people probably would have loved it just as much, if not more. But I digress. When they are given the plans, it's on that main ship. But because the ship is being boarded, they have to escape. So one of the Corvettes, which is the smaller ship we saw in the beginning of New Hope, leaves. That has the plans on it. And when I was thinking in my head was, okay, well, that's the ship that, it's a very similar ship that Leia leaves on. So does it rendezvous with Leia and pick her up, and they mention the whole diplomatic trip from Alderaan? Turns out, Leia's on that fucking ship. She's on that ship. Leia was on the ship that was in the middle of the big suicide battle to get the Death Star plans. What the fuck? Like, seriously? What the fuck was she there for? For a 30-second fucking cameo to say fucking hope? Jesus Christ. It's aggravating. It's so aggravating. And I can't stress enough, I didn't hate the film. I was just disappointed in it. I didn't think it deserved a lot of credit and praise that it gets. It's ultimately a very flawed film with some decent stuff in it. People are saying that it's better than Empire Strikes Back. And the reasoning is because it's got more explosions in it, and it's got more action, and it's really cool. I like it when the AT-ATs come in and they kill people. I like Darth Vader because he has a lightsaber. I like the AT-STs and the TIE fighters, and they have a planet called Jeddah, and that reminds me of Jedi, because that's where Jedi come from. They come from Jeddah. I like all the Star Wars stuff. I like blue milk. I just want to have a cup of blue milk right now. I suppose in the end what I'm trying to say is, was this a movie that needed to be made? Did we need to know how the Death Star plans were given to the rebellion? I think the only time they mention a sacrifice to get the plans was for the second Death Star, when many Bothans died to get these plans. In A New Hope, they don't even mention a great battle or a sacrifice to get these plans. They just have the fucking plans.
The battle station is heavily shielded and carries a firepower greater than half the Starfleet. Its defenses are designed around a direct, large-scale assault. A small, one-man fighter should be able to penetrate the outer defense.
Pardon me for asking, sir, but what good are snub fighters going to be against that?
Well, the Empire doesn't consider a small, one-man fighter to be any threat, or they'd have a tighter defense. An analysis of the plans provided by Princess Leia has demonstrated a weakness in the battle station. The approach will not be easy. You're required to maneuver straight down this trench and skim the surface to this point. The target area is only 2 meters wide. It's a small thermal exhaust port right below the main port. The shaft leads directly to the reactor system. A precise hit will start a chain reaction which should destroy the station. Only a precise hit will set up a chain reaction. The shaft is ray shielded, so you'll have to use proton torpedoes.
That's impossible, even for a computer.
It's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
Then man your ships, and may the Force be with you.
It wasn't until Jedi where it told us that many Bothans died for these plans. And if they made a movie about, if that was the movie, if it was about how they got the Death Star 2 plans, That would have made more sense. Of course, you had to add in some Bothans in there, but it would have made more sense. This was just taking something that didn't exist in the narrative and then turning it into something. Was it needed? No. It really wasn't. Story, narrative speaking, no, it wasn't needed. How they got the plans did not matter in the grand scheme of things of Star Wars films. All we care about is that they have the plans to blow up the Death Star, and that's the point of New Hope, to destroy it. One little line of dialogue, or lack thereof, spawned this film. Now the next few movies that are coming up are the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie and the Han Solo movie. Why? Who fucking cares? I don't give a shit what Obi-Wan was doing in the 20 years he was on Tatooine watching Luke Skywalker, and I don't give a shit what the fuck Han Solo was doing before he wound up in that bar in Mos Eisley. That's not what's important. We don't need to know every aspect of these characters' lives in film on how they got to where we know where they came from. That's just Disney and Marvel and whatever, just trying to make films for the sake of making films for a property that they want to milk badly. Because having the episodic movies is not enough. I do not care if they want to make extended universe movies, but for God's sakes, make them with newer characters. Make them different stories that do not intertwine with the story that we already know. Because that's what these movies are going to do. Link some way to the original trilogy instead of having an off-brand story that happens to be running parallel with these stories. That's like 20 years from now, Disney decides to make the Rey story on how Rey got to Jakku. I know episode 8 and 9 are probably going to explain that a bit more, but why explain it barely in a film when we can have an entire 2-hour adventure on Rey's parents going to Jakku and dropping off Rey? Or what about a movie that takes place in between New Hope and Empire and how they got to Hoth? You know, I often do wonder how they found that snow planet. Maybe there's an interesting story or series of explosions that will tell me how. Star Wars films are great. It's fun to have Star Wars films. It really is. But if you're gonna make new Star Wars films, not only make them interesting, with interesting characters, which is what Star Wars is essentially about, but if you want to make them different, really make them different. Don't do the 1,000 callbacks to previous Star Wars things that we know. Don't hammer fist Vader in there, or Tarkin, or Jabba, or whoever the fuck ever, to just make some fanboys jizz in their pants over this stuff. Show us a new character with their own story that goes parallel with what's going on, whether it involves the grand scheme of things or it's just a Star Wars tale. Show that the universe truly is expanded and not just focused in on this one event in what's supposed to be a giant universe. And that's all I have to say. So, till next time.